So, thank you for letting us interview you today, by the way.
You're welcome.
I wanted to start off with your current project right now, Treme. It's going into the 3rd season, but it was currently delayed. Did you have any concerns about the 3rd season going into the fall instead of the spring like the other seasons?
No, actually, it was a good thing because while it disrupts the watching patterns, the viewing patterns for people, it actually helps us get another season that puts us in a better position, because with us, if it had aired a little earlier in the season and we were supposed to come back in November for the 4th season, that's almost 2 seasons in one budgeting year. You know, so having it spread out a little bit, we can spread the cost a little bit. So when you spread the cost in 2 different years, it gives it a better chance.
Okay. Your character, Antoine Baptiste, is a trumpet player. Can you tell us more about your character?
He's a trombone player.
Trombone.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Antoine Baptiste is one of your classic Treme 6th Ward musicians who have grown up in the culture of the brass band movement and the brass band culture of New Orleans. Treme being the heart of where the culture of New Orleans comes from. Culture is where the intersection of life and of people actually come together, and how they deal with life and love and loss and death and hope and fears and all of that, and how they express that in the way they live, what they cook, what they play, how they interact with each other. That's what culture is. And so that intersection in Treme, in the 6th Ward, goes all the way back to when you had captured Africans who met up with these free people of color, emancipated Haitians, really, who had moved here 40 years before the beginning of the Civil War. And so Africans in New Orleans were allowed to play the drums and dance the bambula in Congo Square on Sundays. And there was an exchange of not only music and dance and culture, but exchange of ideas. So you have free people of color saying you don't have to be a slave. There's a way we can, there's a way to freedom. So it started the civil rights movement too, kind of came out of Treme. But you had these Africans, doing an African 6, boom, 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 and their captors, the European brass, pa pa, and you put it together and it goes boom, ba, boom, ba, boom, jazz. And so that's the tradition. And literally here in New Orleans, we can go and stand on the birthplace of jazz. Congo Square is in the middle of Louis Armstrong Park, and very few places have the connection to culture like that. And so when you have that connection growing up, like Antoine Baptiste did in Treme, it's like the Andrews family, or so many other people, Corey Henry, the Henry family. There's long, rich traditions of jazz and brass band music. So that's who the character is now. He loves his music and he's dedicated to it, and he's a ne'er-do-well when it comes to his personal life. An ex-wife, a girlfriend, lots of kids, different women. So he's a little irresponsible. Well, no, a lot irresponsible. But the one thing he does love is his music, and he loves the woman that he's with, Desiree, and their kids.
Now you talk about the culture. In your opinion, does the series do what it's supposed to do? Does it show the culture of New Orleans, as well as people that come down and actually see the culture?
Well, we try, in any artistic endeavor, it's hit and miss. You succeed some places where you fail in other places. I'm proud of what we're doing on Treme, because seldom has the culture been explored. And how do you depict culture in television? Seldom has this ever been done or attempted to be. So that's what I appreciate about Treme. And we go through great pains to be as authentic as possible and as true as possible. I'm from New Orleans, and so one of the things I wanted to do was make sure that I didn't do anything that I couldn't be proud of, because I knew how important the culture was to people. Now, there will be some people who love it, some people who don't. Some people who are influenced by what they expect and not open to something new, and to see it in all kinds of different lights. You know, so that's the thing that's been kind of interesting in trying to depict it in television, because the culture is something that's different for different people. So to get consensus on it is difficult. But I dare say we are authentic and truthful to what the Mardi Gras Indians are trying to do, or what they do, and our attempt to depict that. I learn every song that I play, every solo that I try to play. But even though I'm just pantomiming and someone else is doing it off screen, we're doing it live. We put on so many musicians and chefs and people who are purveyors of the culture in New Orleans. So I would put Treme up against anything else that is attempted to do justice to the culture of New Orleans. I'm proud of what we're doing, and we still have a long way to go. But I think we are doing a halfway decent job of depicting New Orleans culture as authentically as possible.
Okay. And you're now involved in a new Broadway play, Claiborne Park.
Clyburn, yes.
Clyburn Park. Clyburn Park. Tell me about your involvement in that Broadway play.
Clyburn Park is a Pulitzer Prize winning play from last year, 2011. I saw it in Los Angeles. It ran off Broadway before it came to Los Angeles last year, the year before even. It won the Laurence Olivier Award in London on the West End, and it was coming to Broadway. And one of the main producers had a disagreement with the creative staff, and he pulled out his support. So there was a moment there that they thought the play wouldn't come to Broadway. I got a call because I produced other things on Broadway and off Broadway. I produced August Wilson's last play, Radio Golf, on Broadway. I produced Jitney off Broadway and in Los Angeles and Chicago as it was coming back to New York. And I produced Bureau, a one-man show by Intade Mwine, who was actually Jacques on Treme. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a Ugandan-American actor. And we went back to the Uganda National Theater in Kampala, and I helped him produce that play. So I got the call that Clyburn Park was looking for someone to come in, looking for several people to come in and fill the void that this one producer quitting the show left. And a multitude of people, many people came together, and I'm just one of them that saw an opportunity to bring a really good play, a Pulitzer Prize winning play, to Broadway where it deserves to be, and that's Clyburn Park. And we opened last week. I'm just getting back from New York today, and it was quite successful, and so hopefully it will be a nice long run.
Now, how difficult is it to communicate social messages like in the play, or race in that matter?
What's in the writing? You know, art is all about a forum for society as a whole to make comment on our condition, our human condition, our love, our loss, where we are, where we hope to be, where we've been, what thoughts are to the individual when you lie awake at night and say, man, will I graduate from Dillard? Will I find tuition this year? Wow, that project went well. That's fantastic. I finally overcame that obstacle. All those things you think about as an individual, art should be for the community as a whole. Wow, we've lost our way when it comes to fairness. We've overcome that. We've exposed a lot of people to this helpful program that'll get people into college. So art, that's the role of art. And so you look for things that'll inspire. Look for material that's going to provoke, and that can happen in a multitude of different ways. For Clyburn Park is the material itself. You're looking at the family that's selling the house to the youngers in A Raisin in the Sun. You look, who is this white family that's selling the house, and why are they selling it? And you see Linder saying we shouldn't sell it to black people, and all the things that brings up the racism and classism and all of that happens. And that's in 1959, and that's the first half. And then in the second half, you see 2009, the same neighborhood is all African American now, with a white family buying into it, who want to make it a little mini mansion. And so there's the issues of gentrification that are happening 50 years after the fact. of when this neighborhood turned into from a white neighborhood to black neighborhood and all that goes along with that. And then you say, here's the challenge. We want it to be funny and entertaining and not just provocative. And that's what satire does. Satire is being able to make a poignant, profound, provocative point and at the same time find humor. You know, where the two can coexist, where you don't lose your point, you don't lose the power of that point. And at the same time, it could be humorous or show something that's ironic, opposite of what you thought it would be. That's satire, and that's a very specific thing that a lot of people can't do. So that's the craftsmanship, that's the art, and that's the vehicle and the facility and the tool that is used by artists to make sure that you make social commentary. And you see it throughout our history, you know. President Havel in Poland was a poet and changed the world. Remember hearing Louis Armstrong saying, "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans and miss her each night and day?" Right after Katrina, the impact of that. That's the form in which art works. This land is your land, this land is my land. When Woody Guthrie sang that during the Depression, that meant a lot to poor people, saying, hey, this country is mine too, not just for rich folks. That's something that we're dealing with again today. So it shows you how art can not just be entertaining, but actually can be impactful. So that's the role of art, to have social commentary.
Now, speaking of impact, you've made an incredible impact to the city of New Orleans. Recently, you've been involved with some grocery store chains. Can you tell us about these chains and where you located these grocery stores?
Well, I'm starting one grocery store chain, my own, with my partners, Sterling Farms, that's the name of it. And we realized that New Orleans, like many cities across the country, had food deserts, areas that were declared devoid of services, devoid of access to fresh food, grocers, and an area where you had to go half an hour or more to get to a decent grocery store. And for America to be the richest country in the history of the world and have so many people in food deserts where they don't have access is unacceptable to me. So while I was doing philanthropic housing issues of bringing people back to Pontchartrain Park, we were rebuilding houses in this non-profit Pontchartrain Park CDC, I wanted to create something that I felt as though would be a business that was much needed in underserved communities and at the same time do well and do good. And that's when I realized we had an opportunity to start something like Sterling Farms. So Sterling Farms is a grocery chain that we're starting, bringing to underserved communities, urban communities here in New Orleans, where they haven't had a decent grocery store, don't have access to a decent grocery store outside of a 30-minute ride. And that's the mission, that's the purpose of Sterling Farms. And it is a for-profit business, and hopefully will be one of great impact to the community.
That's great. Is it true?
The reason, I just want to say this, because the social justice movement of the 21st century is economic development. In the 20th century, it was political and social justice coming together, making sure that we have access to the political arena, making sure that there's equality in service and equality, access to voting and accommodations, and that our rights as Americans are honored as equal. Now, while that continues on, the other side that we see is that we have to bring economic development into our communities, because that's where growth comes from. Because there's some that believe that capitalism is a finite thing, there's a small pie, and we got to do everything to keep ours, get mine. But the fact is, growth is about giving access to everyone, an economic engine, more ideas, more wealth, more growth. And that's why I started the grocery store chain also, because the economic development is the social justice of the 21st century.
Have you ever experienced any social injustices living in New Orleans, being from New Orleans?
Well, constantly. You see it, you know. Listen, my parents taught me one thing. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. There are those who do not have your best interest at heart. There are those who do not have your best interest at heart. They will do everything possible to impede your progress, your success. They want something to happen for them in spite of you. They'll try to stop anything that you try to do. And that's what you have to, that's what you see in New Orleans. I mean, right now, in the recovery of New Orleans, it's a city that's a tale of two cities. You know, where while we're thriving and coming back, there's large portions of New Orleans where, you know, the recovery money isn't being spent to bring it back and isn't being spent in a proper way. And you have to make sure that you show advocacy to make sure that that money and those resources are brought to your community while rebuilding it yourself as well. So that happens concurrently. So that happens in New Orleans. So for instance, money was sent down here so that we can all meet the new basic flood elevation. But then we have the government, state government says, well, that money can't be used for new construction. Well, what kind of construction is going to happen after a disaster but new construction? And that's why he wants to redirect the money. So those are the injustices that we continually have to fight. And that's just one example of many more out there.
Now, besides the grocery store chain, the Broadway play in Treme, what else have you been doing with your time?
What little else time I have. Right? You know, I'm still working to bring people back to Pontchartrain Park. It was a thriving African American community that started out of the civil rights movement because blacks couldn't go to the parks even, except for one day of the week, and that was on Wednesdays. That's kind of poignantly important, being that you're a Dillard student. There was a very famous sculptor, Elizabeth Catlett, who taught at Dillard, who just recently died, who wanted to go to the New Orleans Museum of Art and bring her class. And she challenged that segregation policy of not being able to go to the museum except for a certain day.